gonna, I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there chilling?
Good afternoon. Actually, it's the evening time. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for listening in. And this is I'm Shamar Jabari, by the way. And thank you so much for tuning into the Jabari VLC podcast. And I have another guest with me, who is the runner, one of the candidates for the Green Party, who was running for the governor seat. Her name is Michelle Louise Bicking, and we're going to have a great conversation about her campaign and some stuff on her platform. Definitely like, subscribe, and we are looking for supporters as well too. The link will be in the description below, and also you could check out her campaign website as well too. The link is also under me and in the description below. Without further ado, Michelle.
Oh,
Good evening, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Grateful for the rain, since we were having drought-like conditions these last couple of days, so couple of weeks.
Oh man, it's like a drought up there. Oh my God. Are you like, you're in Hartford area, right? Or
I am. I'm in Newington, so we had some heavy rains come through, and we're grateful for it, but yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, drought is so scary. But that's a whole nother struggle right there about why there's droughts and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and listen and giving me the opportunity to talk about your campaign. You guys are a write-in campaign, right?
Yeah. It for some quote unquote third party candidates, if you don't secure 7,500 signatures within a 9-month time frame, your name is not added to the individual line on the ballot. So as a last resort, you end up being written in on the empty ballot space on the ballot itself. So we've opted to include both my initials, and the initials of my Lieutenant Governor, Cassandra A. Martineau, as write-in candidates. And it was a submission process as well. You have to do like a one-pager and submit it to the Secretary of State in order to get approved for write-in status. So.
Yeah, it's quickly. It's just so funny what third parties have to go through that the Democrats and Republicans never have to go through, and how they just made it that way. It's definitely something. Thank you for telling us the process as well too, because that just sounds so irritable and for no reason. I remember when I worked with Peter Gosselin on his campaign about I believe when did William Tong get, like, that was about 3 years ago, right? And just even the fact of trying to get in the same space to debate with these two candidates, just so it's always good to have people run, and a lot of people do win third party, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. So I don't want anyone to feel like it's a discouraged. No, it's not. And it's good to keep running. You never freaking know. And I love what you guys are looking to do. It definitely was some good talking points, which I have put down and prepared for today. The first one is definitely something that is just on everyone's mind after what happened this past summer and spring and summer, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And you guys have this on your platform, which is very, very important, especially when two women are running. And you see how they have like women candidates in Connecticut now that are like, oh yeah, I'm a pro-lifer and I'm proud of it. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't see how, just access to healthcare. That's really what it is. It's not. There's nothing else facetious about it. It's access to healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm. And abortion is healthcare. I mean, it's an option that should be available to any, you know, female identified person who wants to make decisions about their, whether or not to conceive or to have a child. I mean, that's a decision that is best made between, professional caregivers and that person. No one else earns the right to be or to comment on those decisions outside of those two people, right? Um, Another thing is that the party does support myself. I also support and my colleagues bodily autonomy of all people. So it's not just women who are in childbearing age having access, or females, uh,
Mm-hmm.
genetically female persons who may have the possibility of becoming pregnant, right? Because it's not just a women's issue.
Mm.
It's a
Right.
health issue, a comprehensive health issue, a comprehensive reproductive health care. And bodily autonomy speaks to the ability to make decisions about one's personal self, one's physical
Mm.
self, and everyone is entitled to that right, including children. The United States is one of, I believe, two countries that hasn't, we've signed on, but we haven't ratified um, the United Nations Rights of a Child. Um,
Mm.
and it's just devastating because what it says is that women are truly second class, if not third class citizens in this country, and we have no right to have the final say on what our needs are in any fashion.
Wow.
So
This goes as deep as the UN. I didn't even know that.
yeah, we've not signed. In some cases we've ratified certain conventions, certain statutes that are pushed forward by the convention, and it's not mandatory. The United Nations itself has a sketchy history as form of the
Mm-hmm.
League of Nations. However, there are some, really, really powerful legislation that comes out of that body, which, attempts to speak for the world in terms of, social
Right.
justice and human rights, and
Right.
sometimes they get it right, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they do get it right. Um, and, it's terrifying to know that, I mean, 'cause the overturning Roe versus Wade doesn't necessarily stop access to abortions. It stops access to legal and safe abortion, right? People will
Right.
still use means to, protect themselves and their livelihood
Mm-hmm.
um, in any way they should, even if it's going to another state or, trying risky, mechanisms to abort the pregnancy through medical means, physical force, what have you, you know. And we
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have to go back into dark ages just because it's a sexy issue for more right-leaning entities, you know.
Right. Yeah, I
And
definitely agree. And it's so important that we have these discussions because a lot of people, I guess, don't know. And it's important to talk about this and get them like radicalized in this because it's such a it's a human right. Like no deeper than that. How do you feel about the last part on this? How do you feel about how Connecticut is taking charge in this? Is there something that you think we could do better?
I commend Governor Lamont for taking a stand, in terms of acknowledging a woman's right to choose, what's best and needed for herself. Um, I truly commend it, but I think we still have a long way to go in terms of bodily autonomy, not just for women and children, but for everyone.
Mm,
Um, I think there are a lot of social justice and human rights issues that are entwined in that whole notion of freedom to move and freedom to congregate. I mean, there's so many layers, and I think we still have a lot to work to do to addressing them.
right,
You
right.
know?
Yeah, definitely. Um, and I see him a lot in certain areas and stuff like that. And I gotta tell this story. He literally told these kids that was at the coalition. I believe it was a youth coalition
Hmm.
table. They had a sign where they were fighting for Medicaid for immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And he went over to the table and he said, I'm going to come right back. I'm going to talk to you guys about this. And the kids were excited. And I was just in the back of my head, like, he's not coming back. Why would you tell these kids that?
As a mother of a 6-year-old, you never tell a child that you're going to come right back, because they'll never forget that you didn't come back, right? So very dangerous situation. So, I can't speak to. I know you have two other questions, but I just wanted to add to the fact that
go ahead.
what I don't appreciate about Governor Lamont's approach regarding abortion rights is that he is marketing it as a commodity to attract other people to the state, and that kind of takes away from the humanity of people and the needs of people. It's not a thing to add to a commercial to say, oh, your abortion rights are protected if you come to Connecticut and make a life here. I think always having to reduce something to an object to make money off of is just really disheartening. So that's one thing that I can add about the approach. And when I speak about the different layers, I think about, healthcare in general, whereas, reproductive healthcare is just one facet of what comprehensive healthcare should be. And the fact that we don't have access to it in the state. I mean, we have, I think outside of Kentucky, one of the most comprehensive healthcare systems for low-income earners, the Husky program. However, there are flaws in that system, as any system, and there's a whole lot of room for improvement in terms of access and availability. One of the things that I am fighting for is that all persons who are uninsured in the state of Connecticut, including those who are legal residents and migrant workers, should by default have access to Medicaid coverage. They won't have to enroll.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
There's no need to enroll, right? You by default have access to the coverage, and therefore all of the benefits that come from it, in terms of, getting your annual physical and, other routine visits, and your coverage would also include dental benefits as well as eye care, routine eye care, as well as mental health coverage, because all of those things are often dealt with separately, and that's the insurance is dealing with it, making it seem as if it's a separate benefit when it should not be. It should be all bundled under one package and available to everyone who needs it.
And by the way, people that are listening, what she's saying is nothing that is just unorthodox and out of the norm. This is done in other countries, and it's really like something we should have here.
We're the only country. I mean, the list of we're the only country has gotten phenomenally long in the last 30 years. But add to the list that we're the only country that does not have a social safety net that includes medical coverage. If I was in Barbados and I sprained my ankle, I would be able to go to an urgent care office and not have to pay a dime for a splint and pain medication and anything of the sort. There may be a minor copay, but my needs would be attended to without having to have some fancy $500 a month insurance coverage.
Yeah, it's really sad, because the excuse is literally gone of who's going to pay for that. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody in the world now knows of all the benefits that are done in other countries compared to what happens here. And we should be now getting the backbone to make it accountable, hold them accountable more and more. But I guess once you're like stuck in a area like here where, I mean, like there's people in Connecticut that don't even know what Husky is, like I met some people that were like, oh, well, yeah, I pay this much, I pay that much. And then I tell them about Husky and they make less than $30,000 a year. They're like, what? Then they call and they're like, oh my God, I just got free coverage.
Right.
They're like, that's how crazy it is. Like,
and I have worked with, my day job is a medical social worker, and I've worked with many veterans, World War II, Vietnam veterans, who had no idea that they can access Veterans Affairs in state to get in-home support, with bathing, dressing, laundry, cooking, had no idea. They, they automatically assumed that that was only meant for certain people, and for some reason they were not in that club. I had a gentleman most recently, age 98,
Oh wow.
was just finding out through me, and his mind was blown.
98?
98.
Wow, wow. That's interesting.
So it shouldn't be so. I know that a few years ago, and I don't know what the status of the program is, but it's something that I'm very much interested. It was about, no wrongdoer. So, if you're coming to the state of Connecticut and you have some issues that you need to be sorted out, whether it's, accessing low income housing, or, accessing unemployment benefits, or, paid sick leave, or whatever it is, you can start at any agency and be redirected to where you need to go. It's called the No Wrongdoer program. And I think that sometimes what we have right now is all these closed doors that, even though you're knocking and you have the best intention and you've done all your homework, no one's on the receiving end on the other side to direct you to the resources that you deserve, So, it really keeps people, if enough people have had bad experiences trying to access social services, human services from the state, they're less likely to, continue to seek out those services, as well as tell people about it. Like, no, I went down there and I was there when the office opened and they couldn't help me and they gave me the runaround and it was all kind of paperwork, and then they just give up.
Oh
I've
my
seen that as
God.
well. I've seen that as well.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is on purpose, honestly. Do you think that this is on purpose, that Connecticut is?
I do, and it's not me. I consider myself to be a very open-minded, um, uh, pragmatic, as well as hopeful. In my approach to everything, especially life and people. But I do recognize that a lot of this is intentional, and it's class warfare, and as well as it's a furtherance of this whole caste system in the United States that has existed since its founding, where certain people are allowed to be haves and other people are pushed into the category of have-nots. So the denial of access and putting all kinds of impediments in, to receive items that you pay for with your tax dollars. It's a one way of hoarding resources from those who need it and keeping it in a stockpile for those who don't.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And my camera is off because of the internet right now.
No.
So I feel like I'm being rude, just covering my camera right now.
No, you're good, man. You're good.
Yeah, and this is like, and I love how you describe it that way, because it shows exactly like what is the true engine that runs capitalism. They need separation. They need exploitation. They need a class that thinks that they're well off, so they don't complain as much. And while that class thinking they're well off is not complaining as much, the lower class is being the one that's like dealing with all these conditions and stuff. And then the middle class won't notice until something happens to them, and then they have kids that get ratified. Ratified. I can't talk right now. But that's what it's designed to be. And that's why we have to change that system, because it's hard to use this with a system that is made to divide and conquer. But that's a totally different discussion. But going into the class issues, that goes into our next talk about housing. And a lot of people, the myth in Connecticut, there's about two myths that I came to understand, is that a lot of people don't notice like how bad it is for just homelessness with LGBTQ in Connecticut, and then homelessness in general. But I have checked and seen, even just for trans people with housing, like it's so big, it's so bad, and I didn't notice. But they like to, and then the other thing is that people assume that Connecticut is like the countryside, when we have a lot of inner cities and stuff, and these cities are being gentrified now. And it's going to get to the point where I mean I pay $1,000 for my rent, but I can see my place be going at $2,000 for one day, acting like it's New York.
Right, right. I was fortunate to sit in on a Fair Housing Commission meeting about 2 weeks ago, and this is where I learned that the state is divided into urban, suburban, and some other, I can't remember the other category, and each one, specific towns have access to a Fair Housing Commission and can create one, right? So they're in the process of creating a Fair Housing Commission in Middletown. So I was there for the first meeting to talk about what that means for residents in, especially tenants in apartment housing complexes throughout the town, right? Um, and, my interest as a concerned citizen as well as a candidate for governor is how can we designate spaces where access to income-based, income-oriented housing versus affordable housing, which is out of reach of most people. Um, how can that be designated legally? So at the discussion table, we were talking about each town has access to zoning, and the zoning regs could make some sort of statement around 30% of new housing founded in the state, in the town or the jurisdiction needs to be dedicated towards low income, fixed income households, Um, and I thought that that was really incredible that you have that tool at your use if you choose to. I had written an article a couple months ago about addressing the housing crisis in Connecticut because there really is one. I mean, not only are we uh, financially segregated throughout the state, we do have a considerable amount of segregation in other terms, in terms of access to quality housing, right? Um, and my thought is to rehabilitate or uh, raise blighted properties in the state and then make way for low income housing for fixed income earners specifically, for youth and young adults who are transitioning out of the foster care system and don't have a support network that can take them in or the means to afford market rate housing. For members of the LGBTQ plus community of which I belong, housing that is accessible and safe to live. Um, and I think those are amongst my priorities in terms of making that available to people. And I also would like to set a precedent regarding these slum lords that come from out of state and buying up available properties or
Right.
and not just doing that in some cases, but buying up properties and then leaving it in, ridiculously poor conditions that even a dog would not feel welcome living.
Oh God, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
to set some precedent in terms of how folk access land and buildings here, so that they won't take advantage of tax incentives and other, niches in order to hoard their own wealth, right? I remember having a nice, long, drawn-out, heated argument with a out-of-state landlord for a patient of mine, because he had raised her rent $300 in less than a year. And he basically told her that I told her that I was going to do it. And I said, well, what do you expect her to do? I mean, you raised her rent, but there's no like cost of living adjustment for her income, right? What are you expecting to do? Well, she can leave. I said, well, it takes what, $2,000 to $3,000 to move, or to 1 to 2 bedroom household. Where is she going to find the money to do that? Well, that's not my problem. Well, I said, well, I'm making it your problem because so, I'm making it your problem. You got the wrong one here.
Right.
So he said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, well, I have this huge, he went on to say, I have this huge mortgage to take care of. I said, well, maybe then you bought something out of your means and you should readjust your priorities.
Right.
He didn't like that.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, look, I remember when the I can't even think of the term right now, but when they had the rent, what was it, moratorium? I think I'm thinking of a moratorium. Yeah, when they had the moratorium going on, and I was working with Life in My Days, and we were doing like a let me see, what was the name of that camp? Mutual aid. We were doing like a lot of aid, and we were getting a lot of connections between cities and all this stuff. And the one big thing that I saw that happened, it was like a coalition of lawyers that were fighting for housing, and they were saying,
Yeah.
well, dude, like a lot of people are going to be homeless with this
Right.
moratorium,
Right.
and a lot of people are not working right now.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a huge need for and like even now compared to last time was bad, but even now, like after
Yeah.
people surviving this pandemic, losing their jobs, and now we're probably in a recession. The Democrats don't
Mm-hmm.
want to say it's a recession, but the economists are saying that it's a recession that we're about to get into.
Right.
Um, we need affordable housing. We need
Mm-hmm.
it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it should be the priority. But here in New Haven, like when you talk about financial segregation, it is so strong here. I
Yeah.
don't think me and my partner would have even got the location we have now if we didn't work at Yale, because those motherfuckers was grilling me in the
Mm-hmm.
process, just because I had small credit and they wanted to take pictures of the apartment I had before, which was 10 years ago. I felt very evasive how they were
Right.
treating me,
Right.
and that I wonder, like literally, like like they have an idea who they want at their apartments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there's
Apartments
probably a
are
certain
also
image
not
they want to portray, which usually
right,
means wealthy, white, connected. So that's
right.
that's considered like the appropriate facade. Even for the
Hmm.
state, when I've talked to people before moving here, I was told that this was pretty much a monochromatic state, and if you run
Mm.
into someone who's of color, they're probably just visiting. So that was the impression I got before I even moved here 13 years ago.
Oh wow.
And then when you look at the state map about where we're segregated at, in mostly around city centers, even though we have a large series of rural communities in state, but we're delegated certain areas of the state where I guess we're supposed to be, you know. Um,
Yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
redlining, gerrymandering, all of that stuff is also intentional and still very real. I mean,
Hmm.
even in the towns that are majority white, I would say, well, Connecticut is majority white identified anyway. Um, but towns that are more than, I would say, 90% white are often a little bit more affluent, with very few exceptions, right? That's by design. That's by design.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and they do it in such a nice, subtle way. Like you can't even tell.
Mm-hmm.
I had to I literally rethought this scenario over in my head multiple times, and I look at my neighbors and I look at me, and like I'm like, yo, everybody make more money than me in these
Mm-hmm.
in these in these three buildings. It's like three buildings, and we
Well,
live
you,
right
you
across the
you
street
would
from a
think
hospital.
so, but you don't
Yeah,
quite know everybody's situation. You may think they make more money than you, but they may be a trust fund
yeah,
baby. You know what I mean? They may
yep.
be borrowing off of credit. I remember I was in the bank one time, and this gentleman, was talking a little bit too loud, so I got to hear his whole entire conversation with the bank representative. How about he was pulling about 175, and his wife was pulling about 200, but because of his poor credit history, he wasn't eligible for. They were looking to get a mortgage, and the wife couldn't put him on the mortgage with him because his credit was so poor. Right.
Oh wow.
So you don't really know where people are coming from or where they're getting that money or what, but the facade is the most important. The image of
Yeah.
wealth and comfort is more important than the actual thing. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are faking the funk,
Mm.
just to live up to that perception.
Mm.
Mm.
And when you bring up redlining, redlining is such a big conversation, because like this is an old thing that's been going on for a long time, right?
Mhm,
And when we look at the demographics of how certain cities were before, I guess what the term is, the Great White Flight, like before
mhm,
all the white people decided to leave the urban cities and leave it to people of color. They
mhm,
occupied, it was Irish, black, not black, Irish and Italian
mhm,
descent mostly, especially here in New Haven. I don't know about other cities. We'll talk about New Haven. And when you look at where they were at, so like the slums here, what you will say is like the jungle's gone, and I'm so mad that place was like called the jungle. They bulldozed the jungle. They bulldozed the G. So what's left is
mhm,
Fairhaven, Dixwell, which is
mhm,
New Hallville. I'm in the Tray, but I call it the White because I don't really know why it's called the Tray. I'm from
mhm.
Bridgeport, so I can do that.
Okay, okay.
But you see the crime like the crime was similar to what the crime is now in those
Mhm.
same areas. So
Mhm.
it shows you exactly like what poverty is. And it's just sad that they choose to act this way when people come from these neighborhoods. And I mean, even Yale itself, that's another thing. I'm just like thinking about this, like what brings up
Mhm.
a separation about income. Like even Yale itself, they had to be a campaign to force them to hire 1,000 people that live in New Haven because they kept hiring people from around
Mhm.
Wallingford,
Out of country even.
Fairfield, all that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
All about that
me
facade.
too. Yeah.
All about the facade. That's the way
So
they keep bankrolled by all of these keep their endowments funded is by presenting a certain image to these their benefactors. So. Mhm.
mm, mm.
Mhm.
So for Connecticut, as a whole, because we're on governor level, not city level, what do you
Mhm.
think would be the first steps to introduce better housing for the state? Like if you could think of like what if there's a great, like what would be the great first start into
Mhm.
introducing housing? Because these developers and these homeowners are automatically going to be mad.
It's okay. Folk can be mad. Like I said, not all medicine tastes good. You know, some medicine is mighty bitter. Um, I would think that the first major step in addressing the historic ills regarding the housing of families in this state is to revamp the tax code. Um, it's very regressive in nature, and it benefits the wealthy more than anyone else. So one of the tax initiatives that I'm very much vested in is land value tax, because not people, sometimes businesses keep their properties
Mhm.
in poor condition because they don't have to pay anything, or they pay less because it's destitute and it's run down. However, if you
Right, right,
revamp the tax code to say, well, this land is being taxed based on the worth of the property itself or the area itself, then two things can happen. One, the homeowner would either, well, three, they can decide to homeowner, business owner, or owner of that property or parcel could decide to sell it. They could decide to repair it, or they can, giving it up in an auction. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to
mm,
they would do something but something needs to be done, and something would be done in a case like that if a land value tax was instituted. So, that's one of the things that I favor. And we have so many
mm.
different properties around the state. I was driving around to see my clients today, and I was looking at all these seemingly abandoned on the outside buildings. Some with for sale
Right.
signs outside. Most of them are not. And in my mind, I'm like, that would make a great senior housing. You could put a little, walking path around and a center area for people to congregate and barbecue and that sort of. That's where my mind goes automatically when I see properties like that. I was like, how can people just sit there and see nothing, right? I can see a
Right,
brand.
right.
I passed by some and I said that would be a great park for kids. You put up the jungle gym. All the different things so they can get some exercise, stretch their legs or whatever. I always think about possibilities when I'm driving around. You know, doing my day job.
Yeah, yeah. Bridgeport, where I'm from, we have a lot of abandoned buildings.
Hmm.
Um, when I went to New London, I was just so shocked by how much buildings are vacant there, just driving around.
Yeah.
Um,
And
there's
I understand
so
it's a remnant
there's so
remnant of
much.
the industrial age here. I totally get it, but it shouldn't. I mean, it's really disturbing to the psyche to be around
Right,
so much ruin, right? It's as if
right.
you're telling people that your neighborhood doesn't matter. It's run down, and therefore, of course, you're going to have higher crime and stuff, and of course, you're going to, be in a destitute situation because your neighborhood mirrors it. You know,
Yeah,
beautification
and
efforts,
I should have added.
bike paths. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, finish what you were saying. I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, just thinking in terms of when it's an inside outside process, right? To reinvigorate a space. It makes a
Right.
difference on how it looks. It truly does. You take pride in your neighborhood when they're, oddly enough, gardens that are healthy and lush, access to bike paths, access to, lighting, for the nighttime hours. I mean, all those different things that may seem like they're aesthetics are really necessary for people to feel comfortable and at home. So when you actually invest in things like that, it makes people have a sense of ownership to where they live, even if they're just a tenant in an apartment. And there's no just there. It should not be the word just before that. You live here, you raise your kids, take care of
Right.
your grandparents, you know what I mean? You go to school here. You should feel like it's home, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like changes of environments definitely switches the psyche. When you look at
Mm-hmm.
where you're at, it changes your mindset a lot, especially at home. You know, when your home is like you got a lot of stuff going on everywhere, and then when you tidy up, you feel so much better. It's like almost therapy in a way.
No, it definitely is therapeutic.
I want
Coming
to
from a
actually.
therapist, I can totally admit to that. One of the things that we'd always, when I worked in residential, right? I worked with the scariest population on the planet, which is 14-year-old to 19-year-old girls, right? Scariest population on the planet. I would work with hardened criminals, right? In
Oh
solitary
wow.
before you put me in a situation with
Hmm.
14 to 19-year-old girls, right? God bless them all. Um, one of the things that we would teach each one of them is that when you get up in the morning, make your bed. There's something about that
Mm.
simple act of defiance, of all that's been holding you back and keeping you from being your best self, just by the simple act of making your bed. Because when you come back into your room, there's nothing like getting a bed that has the sheets have been flattened and the pillows have been puffed up and everything is arranged the way you like it. There's nothing like that feel,
Mhm.
you know. So yeah, I get that. I really
Yeah,
do.
yeah, I definitely get that feel whenever I come home. I definitely understand that.
Hmm.
Those girls are put in the right direction right there.
Hmm. They taught me more
Lastly,
about life than anybody else. Those young
so
girls, I tell you.
we were touching a little bit. Sorry about that. We were touching
Mhm.
a little bit on crime, a little bit, because I honestly, it's what everybody's talking about now, and the narrative is that crime is getting like more. The crime rate is increasing, which
Mhm.
I don't disagree. I mean, I disagree with kind of
Mhm.
because I think that areas are changing, and that's what it is, and
Mhm.
because of the pandemic. So people are
Mhm.
seeing what happens when poverty structures your neighborhood. I don't know. But do you think crime is increasing?
I don't think so. Um, I remember an elder telling me years ago that when we have initiatives that are targeting youth, inner city in particular, it seems like it lasts for maybe a year, 2 years, and then the either the funds dry up or the will does. If you actually want to keep people sound and connected to each other, you really have to have opportunities that continues and that cycles and picks up the next generation of young people with it. A lot of things that I've seen around here lately is the carjackings and people stealing cars right out of people's driveways, and then you notice that most of the offenders are in their 20s and late teens, right? What do we have available for these young people, especially post peri-pandemic? What outlets do they have? What does their family situation look like? You know, and I don't just want to denigrate that particular demographic, but I just notice in that situation, what are these young people doing? What do they have access? You know what I mean. So I don't believe that crime per se, and just looking at national statistics as well as trends in state, I have no reason to believe that it's something new. I think people just pay attention to it, especially in election year, to give cause to more police on the beat, and to take away funding from other
Right.
resources to make that happen. Right. More police presence does not necessarily equate with lower crime levels. I know this
Right.
research that has been done recently where an increase in police presence actions does the exact opposite. Right. Um,
No
especially as
one's reading
people.
that, by the way. I literally
Hmm.
explain that to people and they don't believe me.
Hmm.
Like the fact that when you hire more cops and you increase presence,
Hmm.
it doesn't fix the problem. You just have
No,
more
it doesn't.
issues because you know
You
why?
have more issues.
You got
Hmm.
people out there cracking more heads.
Hmm.
It-
The police were never made, as everybody knows that the police are former slave catchers, right? So the police were
right.
never made to solve crimes. They show up when a crime is actually occurring, and they may or may not have the tools to be able to address and never mind diffuse the situation to actually find out what actually happened. That's not what they're trained for. Um, and that speaks to a lot of issues. I mean, our police in this country, never mind the state, act more like its own militia, and don't actually have the public good in mind, more of the private uh, good than anything else. Their charge is to protect personal property of the wealthy, right? Store owners, business owners,
Right.
and the like. They have no interest, no vested interest in taking care of people, you know. And not to
Yeah.
say there isn't a rare exception, because I know there's a lot of great people out there who don that badge and understand the commitment to it, because it's fueled by their own personal values of empathy and respect for others and integrity. But there are others who take advantage of the fact that they have that privilege and use it for their own personal vendetta against persons of color. I'm not afraid to
Oh
say
yeah.
that.
Oh
You
yeah,
know.
no, no. And I'm glad that you're saying it because everybody else is saying the total opposite. You see these Democrats, they go in and they let these kids bring out these signs saying defund the
Mhm.
police. And they're like, oh yeah, we're with you guys. And then as soon as they go back to Washington, we don't
Mhm.
need to defund the police. We need to fund the police. It's like they
Right.
just took their power and just diminished it and not even trying to listen to what defunding the police could actually mean. I mean, I'm on the level of abolishment and
Mhm.
and thinking of a new different way, a new different system of crime and actually
Yeah.
analyzing what crime really is,
Right.
but that's a different topic.
Well,
But just for
if
the simple act of funding.
if I'm deemed worthy to join you again and others for a conversation around restorative justice, I'm happy to do that. That's the direction that I'm headed. Restorative
Oh,
justice really speaks to the community handling, particular issues related to our young men, women, and children, and everybody in between, and the
mm,
community seeking reconciliation, or encouraging the person to seek reconciliation with the alleged offender, you know
mm,
um, or the offendee, rather, the offender seeking reconciliation with the offendee. Um, so I think that does more to preserving the natural ties between people and building up a social support network between communities and neighborhoods than increasing an authoritative police system that's only bent on controlling the message as well as physically controlling the people who live there.
it's just so reactionary. It really is. And
Hmm.
it's so scary because of how they're just militarized now
Hmm.
and
We are in a
the,
fascist state.
I
Well,
mean,
there never was a democracy you
mhm,
know, from the founding of this country.
right,
But we have
right,
particularly evolved into a fascist state where police systems, police departments are militarized, and wealth is hoarded and kept to a very privileged few. And the message is always very tight, very streamlined, and everyone must follow suit. And then in the midst of that, when you have your bread and circuses, people are distracted by things to keep them compliant and occupied, you know. So we have
mm,
our television shows, our movies, everything to make us seem as if we're free and if we have, more than what others have, but that's not the case. We have less. We have less.
right. And at the end
Mhm.
of the day, if you can't pay for it, your freedom will be sleeping on the park bench until
Right.
the
You
police
have the
come and give
freedom to
you a
be
ticket.
poor. That's right. That's right. That's right. Until you become a nuisance
Well,
for someone and then you're incarcerated for being,
right.
you know.
Oh man, Michelle, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me. This and I want to wish you the best of luck. I'm telling everybody about you that I know. So everyone that
Sure.
knows me is well aware of who you are. And I love the fact that that you guys have this platform that's touching on so many things, and I love the fact that you are actually in the works, like on ground. You have experience on what exactly that you're talking about, and I gotta say that these are the type of things that we need to build a better community and a better system. And I'm gonna thank you so much for being one of the leaders that we have to spearhead that. For my last words, I would like to say that on capitalism, that there was a man named Lenin that said, fascism is capitalism in decay. And that is a warning for people to understand that where we're heading, it's not going to be good, and we're going to need to change this system. Do you have any advice for any young organizers out there that are trying to change?
I do, which is something I say a lot lately, and that's stay encouraged. Surround yourself with people that love and invest and believe in you. Do what you need to do in order to preserve your health, your sanity, your wellness, and never lose sight of the person that you are. Quickly, I know I have to go, but I just wanted to share, like 2.5 years ago, I was laying in a hotel, bleeding profusely because I had been moving around more than I should post-surgery. I was homeless, and I had my son with me in the hotel and had no idea what was going to happen to me. And I prayed to the ancestors, to all the gods, whoever is out there, please do not give up on me. Please. And, 2.5 years later, I'm a homeowner. I'm starting my doctorate, God willing, next year. I'm doing the job that I feel like I am called to do in terms of social work, and then the extension of my ministry, running for office. And, in so many ways, everything has told me that I haven't been given up on. And I want you all to remember that the world is not finished with you yet. That even if you find yourself in a place where you seem like there's no possible way out, go in. Go into yourself. Remember where you came from, who you are, and you'll make a way. Stay encouraged.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and I hope to see you again, and good luck in your campaign. And thank you so much for being, oh man, that was such an amazing story. Thank you so much for just being an inspiration, and I hope you have a really good night.
You too, dear.
Blank period, yeah. On my black, brown, and indigenous. Gotta holler if you really feeling this. Gotta holler if you really real enough. Other rappers is delirious. Yeah, it's really that serious. Better holler if you really feeling me. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna live in abundance. I gotta keep it 100, ayy. If you don't like it, then fuck it, ayy. We gonna win in the end, yeah, we gonna. I gotta keep it 100. We gotta stop all the stunting. You know we coming from nothing. Yo, you talking about money, you bluffing. We gotta do something different. We gotta change how we live in. We gotta do better for women. We gotta do better for children. We gotta listen to victims, whether Jewish or Muslim or Christian. It doesn't matter your religion. You gotta stand against the system, or else you just another villain. How you just sitting there